first started studying knowledge management, which was about 15 years ago, I decided I needed to find out what the very best companies were doing. And so I went to 15 different organizations that were doing knowledge management pretty well, and I began to ask them what it was that they were doing. And I would interview people and I would watch them do processes. And after I had done a number of those, I got very puzzled because I thought that I would find that all companies were doing something that was very similar, and I could call that a best practice. But what I discovered was that every company was doing something quite different. So then I had to figure out, well, why would that be? Why would something work in one company and it would be different in a very different company? What I discovered when I looked at all those interviews and I analyzed all that data, what I discovered was that what I had to look at was what was the nature of the knowledge. What kind of knowledge was it? And some companies were talking about different kinds of knowledge and learning and sharing different kinds of knowledge than other companies were. For example, one of the companies that I went to was Ford Motor Company. And they had plants in Germany, they had plants in the United States, they had plants in Sweden, they had plants in many different countries. But all of those plants were doing exactly the same thing. Maybe they were building a truck, and they would build the same truck in Sweden as they built in the United States. So when someone in Sweden learned how to do that in a new and better way, they could write those instructions down and they could send them to the United States, and then those people could do exactly the same thing because it was a very procedure that they went through. And in fact, they would do the same procedure maybe 200 times a day as each truck came off the line. So that knowledge could be written down. It was easy to replicate that knowledge. But when I went to British Petroleum and when I went to the United States Army, they were doing it very differently. And the knowledge was very different. The knowledge that British Petroleum was doing when they were exploring for oil, every time they explored, the situation was different. And the context, we say, the word context was different. So the only way they could share that knowledge was to bring people together. So if one group had been very good at finding oil in the Gulf of Mexico, then they needed to come together with the group that was in Venezuela and share their knowledge by having a conversation. So the context was different, and the knowledge they had was mostly in their heads. So we learned very early on that you had to look at the knowledge, and that some knowledge can be shared by writing it down and putting it in a repository or putting it in a database, and other knowledge has to be shared by having a conversation where one person can explain what their context is, and then the other can help them about that context.